flower will not lie about its season. You can force it to open early, under lamps, in somebody else's winter. But it never holds. I found out my husband was leaving me at 4 a.m, standing in a walk-in cooler, holding the most expensive order our flower shop had taken all year. It had come in 3 weeks earlier through the shop's website, marked private, billed to a business account I did not recognize. A proposal. The full setup, an arch of white and blush garden roses, 200 candles, petals lining a stone terrace at the Larkspur House, the boutique hotel where this town holds the weddings it wants people to talk about. Whoever he was, this man wanted out-of-season peonies in April, and he wanted perfection, and he did not care what perfection cost. Brooke, the new creative director my husband had hired, was supposed to design it. She posted about it for 3 weeks, but at 4 a.m, in the cold room, it was my hands wiring every stem, because it was always my hands. That is what nobody tells you about the fancy title on a flower shop wall. Someone still has to know how to make a rose stand up straight. I was tying off the bridal-style bouquet, the centerpiece of the whole thing, when the envelope with the card slid out of the order folder and landed face up on the wet floor. I recognized the handwriting before I understood the words. I had been reading that handwriting on grocery lists and mortgage papers for 18 years. The card said, "Brooke, you are my spring. Marry me, M." My husband was proposing to his creative director, on our terrace, this Saturday, with my flowers. The smell of the roses turned on me first. 18 years of loving that smell, and in one breath it was too sweet, like perfume on a stranger's collar. I grabbed the steel shelving to stay upright, and the buckets rattled, and a sound started in my chest that I did not let finish. I stood in that cooler until my fingers went numb, and then I did the only thing nobody in this story expected. I finished the bouquet, and I made it perfect. If you have ever kept working with your heart in pieces because your hands would not let the work be ugly, take a second and subscribe. Now let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Iris, and for 26 years, I have made flowers behave in Walla Walla, Washington. Wine country. A town of stone tasting rooms and long golden light, where every vineyard dinner and every retirement party and every apology in this valley eventually walks through a florist's door. I did not inherit this. There was no grandmother with a garden, no family greenhouse. I grew up over a laundromat, and at 20, I took the only job that answered my application. Delivery girl for Hastings Flowers, an old storefront on Colville Street run by a widow named Willa Hastings. Minimum wage, a borrowed van, and boxes of arrangements I was not allowed to touch. But I watched. Every morning while Willa built her orders, I watched her strip thorns with 2 moves of a paring knife, watched her turn a bucket of loose stems into something that looked like it had grown that way. One February, when a blizzard kept her home, a funeral order had to go out and there was nobody else. I built my first casket spray alone at that workbench with her instructions crackling through the phone, and when Willa saw a photograph of it later, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Well, the van can learn to drive itself." She taught me everything after that. How to condition a stem so a rose drinks for 10 days instead of 3. How to wire a bloom so it holds its face up in July heat. How grief orders are built looser because grief needs air. And in my 3rd year, on the morning she first let a wedding leave that shop built by my hands alone, she taught me the lesson that runs underneath this whole story. She took one thin stem of seeded eucalyptus, tucked it deep inside the focal rose of the bridal bouquet, invisible unless you knew, and said, "Sign your work, Iris. Not for them, for you. A good arrangement will outlive every card attached to it, so let the work say who made it." I have hidden one stem of seeded eucalyptus inside the focal flower of every important piece I have made since. 26 years of weddings, hospital rooms, and funerals in this valley carry that signature. You will want to remember it. It matters later. The year after that, with Willa half retired and watching from the register, came my first big wedding truly on my own. A harvest ceremony at one of the small family vineyards up Mill Creek Road. The bride's mother pulled me aside and asked, embarrassed, if there was a way to make $400 look like $4,000. There is. It is called labor. I foraged half that wedding from roadsides and orchard prunings and worked 2 nights straight wiring it into something wild and enormous and honest. During the toasts, the winemaker's father, a man who had seen 60 harvests, pointed his glass at the arbor and said it was the first wedding he had ever seen that looked like it grew there. People from that wedding still order from me 22 years later. Not because it was grand, because it told the truth about the people under it. That is the whole trade right there. Anybody can buy beautiful. You hire hands to make it true. The man I married walked into the shop in 2007, selling wine. Martin Mercer, sales rep for a distributor out of Spokane, all warm handshakes and easy compliments. The kind of man who remembers your name and makes you feel like the only account on his list. He courted me the way he sold Cabernet, attentively and in volume. We were married within a year at a little ceremony between 2 rows of vines, and I carried a bouquet I built myself, with the eucalyptus hidden in the center where nobody could see it but me. And I will not pretend there were no good years, because there were, and you deserve the truth. He was funny. He filled a room. In the early years, he would come by the shop at closing on Fridays with a bottle he was not supposed to have from a client's allocation, and we would sit on the workbench among the buckets, and he would ask about every order, who it was for, what it meant, why I chose ranunculus over roses. He listened like my answers were worth money. I have thought about that a lot since, and here is the truth I landed on. He did listen like my answers were worth money. He was not learning me. He was appraising me. When Willa put the shop up for sale in 2015, it was Martin who said we should buy it. Martin who talked the bank into the loan. Martin who stood in the empty storefront and spread his arms like a man presenting a kingdom. Then, the new sign went up. Mercer Floral Company. His last name. Not mine. Not even Willa's. I remember standing on the sidewalk looking at it, and he put his arm around me and said, "It's cleaner for the business, Iris." Mercer sounds established, and I told myself it was just a sign. That is the thing about erosion. It never asks you to swallow the ocean. Just one small stone, and then the next one. If you want to know how a marriage like mine dies, do not look for the explosion. Look for the pruning. One quiet cut at a time, always explained, always reasonable, until the shape of you is whatever he decided to leave standing. Inside the shop, the division of labor was simple. I was the product. I built every wedding, every standing account, every vineyard dinner. Martin handled what he called the business side, which meant lunches, invoices, and taking the credit at Chamber of Commerce mixers. The Larkspur House alone, the hotel with the stone terrace, was nearly a third of our year. Their lobby arrangements every Monday, their event florals all season. The Larkspur's event director in those years hired us again and again, and Martin genuinely believed she was buying his handshake. At home, the same rule wore a wedding ring. My work paid the loan, but somehow it was his shop. My name was on nothing. The van, the lease, the business account. Mercer, Mercer, Mercer. He called my paycheck an allowance once. He laughed. I filed it away, one more stone. But the sentence I want you to hear, the one this whole story turns on, came at a wine club dinner 3 years ago, in front of 2 tables of people we knew. Someone's wife, being kind, asked about my side of the work, and said she had heard I was the real artist. And Martin leaned back with his glass and said in that warm salesman voice, "Iris? Iris is not a florist. She's a delivery girl who plays with leftover stems." The table laughed. He grinned at me over the candles, so pleased with himself, so certain I would smile too. And I did. That is the part that still shames me. I smiled because 20 years of keeping the peace will train your face to do things your heart has stopped agreeing to. In the truck afterward, I said quietly, "I built every arrangement on those tables tonight." And he patted my hand twice, the way you settle a nervous dog, and said, "Honey, it was a joke. Everybody knows you're my secret weapon." Then he asked if we had anything at home for breakfast, and the conversation was over because he had decided it was. A man who calls you his secret weapon is telling you exactly where he plans to keep you. Secret. The year after that dinner, he cut my flower budget. He stood in the office with a spreadsheet and explained patiently, as if to a child, that I was overspending on product, that customers cannot tell a garden rose from a grocery rose. That margin is margin. So I did what women like me have always done with a gutted budget. I paid the difference out of my own hands. I got up earlier. I drove farther, to a grower outside Milton Freewater, who saved me his seconds. I learned to make $80 of stems carry a $200 room. The larkspur never noticed a dip because there was never a dip to notice. Martin read the quarter's numbers and told his golf group that streamlining the creative side had been overdue. That is the trick of invisible work. Done well, it proves the person erasing you right. Brooke arrived 3 winters ago, 29 years old, a marketing certificate, and a phone she wielded like a scalpel. Martin hired her without asking me, gave her the title Creative Director, and gave her the front of the shop. Suddenly, there were ring lights among my buckets. Suddenly, the shop's little social media page was full of Brooke in an apron she never got wet, holding bouquets she had not built, tagging everything #maker, #myart. The customers who knew, knew. But new customers did not, and slowly the story of the shop rewrote itself with me outside it. Brooke redesigned the website. My name, which had at least lived quietly on the About page, disappeared. When the local lifestyle magazine did a feature on the Valley's wedding vendors, the photograph showed Martin and Brooke, arm in arm, under my arch. And then came September. Martin called me into the office, Brooke already seated, already comfortable, and told me the shop was restructuring the creative department. Brooke would take over design and client meetings. I would move to processing, the back room, stripping thorns, cutting stems, filling buckets, hosing the floors. The work I did at 20 handed back to me at 46 like a verdict. "It's a better use of your strengths," Martin said, not meeting my eyes. And Brooke smiled at me the way you smile at furniture you are planning to replace, and added, "You're honestly so much faster at prep than anyone." I went to the back room. I stripped thorns. And every single arrangement that left that shop with Brooke's name in the caption still passed through my hands first, because Brooke could style a photograph, but she could not wire a stem, and both of us knew it, and only one of us said nothing. I will give you one afternoon so you understand exactly how it worked. In October, Brooke took her first solo bridal consultation for a winter wedding at a tasting room out on the highway. She promised the bride anemones in December, promised a hanging installation for a ceiling that I knew, from 15 years of working that room, could not take the weight. Then she dropped the folder in my bucket sink and said, "Just make the recipe work, okay?" And I did. I substituted, I sourced, I rebuilt her fantasy into something that would actually stand up in a heated room in winter. The wedding was beautiful. The bride cried and hugged Brooke. That night, the shop's page posted 12 photographs of my arrangements with a caption about Brooke's design philosophy, and Martin commented with 3 clapping hands, and I sat in my truck in the alley reading it with dirt still under my nails, and I want to be very honest with you about what I felt. Not rage, something quieter and worse. The feeling of watching your own hands being slowly reclassified as somebody else's talent, one caption at a time, while the man who promised to love you leads the applause. People ask why women stay. I stayed because the work was still mine, even when the credit was not. What I could not have known, stripping thorns in that back room through the winter, was that the next big order to hit my bucket sink would be the one that set me free. Would you have recognized your freedom if it arrived looking like the cruelest order of your career? Which brings us back to the cooler, 4 a.m, the card on the wet floor. Brooke, you are my spring. Marry me, M. Here is what I did not do. I did not scream. I did not drive home and burn his suits on the lawn. I did not even cry, not then. The crying came later, standing in my kitchen at sunrise, quietly, the way you cry when the thing you feared for years finally has a date and a florist. Here is what I did instead. I read the whole order file: the terrace at the Larkspur House, Saturday evening, the arch, the candles. 200 guests worth of champagne florals to follow, because it was not just a proposal, it was a party, a coronation. He had budgeted more for that one night than he had let me spend on the shop's flowers in a year. And at the bottom of the work order, in the assignment field, Brooke had written her own name as designer with a note. "I'll handle the creative. Iris can prep." Iris can prep. Some of you have your own version of those 3 words, sitting in a work order or an email or a sentence set across a kitchen. I sat down on an upturned bucket in the cooler with the card in my hand, and I pruned my marriage the way you prune a dying rose, one stem at a time, all the way down, looking for green. 18 years. The sign with his name. The budget cuts I had covered with my own back. The party trick. The caption with the clapping hands. No green anywhere. And now this. The man was not even paying for his own betrayal. The proposal, the arch, the candles, all of it was billed to the shop's business account. To the margin I had built. I was not just the woman being replaced. I was the woman funding the ceremony. I thought about calling someone and realized that in a town this size, there was no one whose name would not reach him before Saturday. And then a colder, clearer thought arrived, the kind that comes at 4 a.m, surrounded by refrigerated roses. He had not hidden this from me because he feared my anger. He had routed the order through his own shop because it never occurred to him that the woman in the processing room would read the card. You do not keep secrets from a pair of scissors. That is what I was to him. A tool that came with the building. For 3 days I prepped. And then, the night before, alone in the shop from midnight on, I built it. All of it. The arch that looked like it had grown out of the stone. The garden roses opened to the exact hour because I conditioned them in warm water at midnight so they would peak Saturday at dusk. The out-of-season peonies I had sourced from a grower in Chile through a contact Brooke did not know existed, because forcing spring in April is exactly the kind of lie a delivery girl spends 26 years learning to tell beautifully. And the bouquet. The one he would hold out to her while he knelt. White garden roses, sweet pea, a whisper of jasmine down the ribbon. The finest thing I have ever built. I want that on the record. Not the finest thing I ever built for him. The finest thing I ever built. And deep inside the focal rose, where nobody would ever see it, I tucked one thin stem of seeded eucalyptus. "Sign your work," Willa said. "Not for them, for you." Saturday morning, I loaded the van myself, drove to the Larkspur House, and installed the whole event with Sadie, our young delivery driver, the only person in that building who still looked me in the eye. When the last candle was set, I stood on that terrace for 1 minute, golden light on the vines below, my arch, my roses, the stage for my own replacement, and it was, and I say this with a strange and terrible pride, the best work of my life. Then I drove the van back, hung the keys on the hook, left my apron folded on the workbench, and took my scissors. The Japanese steel pair I bought with my first paycheck from Willa, the pair Martin used to hold up at parties as a joke about how seriously I took the little flower job. The apron was his, the scissors were mine. It has taken me my whole life to learn which things in a room actually belong to you. And one thing I carried out of that shop, hidden inside a rose on a hotel terrace, was already working for me. I just did not know it yet. I did not leave a letter. He had made the position clear for years. Nothing in that building was mine, not the sign, not the story, not the credit. Fine. Then my absence was not his to keep either. I was not there on Saturday night. What happened on that terrace I heard afterward in pieces, from Sadie and from one other woman, the one this act belongs to. Her name is Simone Ashworth, and she is the event director of the Larkspur House. 10 years ago, before that title, she was a bride herself, a girl marrying into no money at the little church hall on Rose Street, and the wedding was small enough that her bouquet came from a walk-in order at an old shop on Colville. I remember it because I remember them all. Sweet pea and cream roses, tight budget, big hands shaking as she took the wrap. Willa was already gone by then, and the sign outside already said, Mercer. The bouquet was mine. Simone never knew my name, but she kept that bouquet, dried, in a shadow box, the way you keep the one beautiful thing from the year you were poorest. And years later, planning events for the Valley's grandest hotel, she noticed something odd in the dried heart of her focal rose. A thin, silver-green stem that had no reason to be there. Seeded eucalyptus, tucked deep, invisible from outside. She thought it was an accident, until Saturday night, until she walked the terrace before the guests came up, checking candles the way event directors do, and leaned over the bridal bouquet waiting on its stand, and saw, deep inside the focal rose, a thin stem of seeded eucalyptus. She told me later that her hand went to her phone to photograph it, before her mind had even caught up with why. 9 years apart. Same hidden signature, which meant the same hands, which meant the person who had been quietly making her hotel look extraordinary all these seasons was the same person who had once made a broke 25-year-old feel like a queen for $60. The proposal happened. I am told it was beautiful. I am told Brooke cried on cue, and the candles behaved, and my arch looked like a cathedral. And I am told that when Martin stood up with his champagne, flush with victory, he raised his glass. He thanked, and I quote, Brooke's incredible vision with these flowers, the new creative soul of Mercer Floral. And Simone Ashworth, standing at the edge of her own terrace, looked at the arch, and the roses opened to the exact hour, and said, just loud enough for the people beside her, funny. The wiring in that arch takes about 20 years to learn. Sadie was standing by the service door with the extra candles, and she tells this part better than I ever could. Brooke heard it. Brooke's smile did that thing smiles do when the person wearing one realizes somebody in the room can actually read. She spent the rest of the evening steering Martin away from the woman in the navy suit, the way you steer a boat away from rocks. It did not help. Rocks do not need you to see them. They just need you to keep sailing. Then she went inside, pulled up the hotel's vendor file, and called the shop's office line first thing Monday. Sadie answered. Simone asked one question. The person who built Saturday, who was it? And is it true they're gone? Sadie, bless her forever, answered like the sworn witness she had been waiting all year to become. Iris Novak built all of it. She built everything here. She left Saturday with her scissors. 2 days later, Simone Ashworth was standing on my porch with the shadow box under her arm. She held it out, pointed at the silver-green stem inside the dried rose, and said the sentence I had been waiting 26 years to hear without knowing it. You signed my wedding, and I never got to thank the artist. I am not letting this valley make that mistake twice. The Larkspur House does not have its own florist. It never has. Every hotel that size buys its flowers from a shop in town, and for a decade, the shop had been ours. Had been Mercer Floral. Had been, if we are being precise for once, me. Simone sat at my kitchen table and made an offer so simple it took my breath. The hotel's events for the coming season contracted directly to me, not to a shop, to a name, Iris Novak, floral design. And because I had no studio, no cooler, no bench, she added the part I still cannot tell without stopping. The old greenhouse on the hotel's back lot, glass and good bones, standing empty for a decade. Fix it up, take it out of your first season's invoices. A place that sells beauty ought to grow some. I signed with her fountain pen, my own name, on my own contract for the first time in my life. 46 years old. I will spare you the montage because this channel is about true things, and the true things were small and slow. Scrubbing greenhouse glass for 2 weeks with Sadie, who quit the shop the day she heard and came with me for honest wages and 10%. 60-year-old window latches soaking in vinegar, long drives to the wholesale market in the dark, and underneath it all, the strangeness of working without armor. For 26 years, every piece I made had gone out under somebody else's name, and there is a terrible safety in that. If a rose browned early, it was the shop's rose. Now every stem in the valley that carried my signature also carried my name, out loud, on an invoice. The first Monday I delivered lobby arrangements to the Larkspur under my own account, I sat in the van in the service lot for 5 full minutes before I carried them in, the way you breathe before you dive. Then came my first Larkspur wedding under my own name, a September vineyard ceremony, the bride's mother holding my hand too long at the end of the night, saying her daughter had shown her a picture from another wedding years ago and said, "Find whoever did that." Word travels in a valley like a scent on the evening air. The vineyards followed the hotel, the wine club dinners followed the vineyards. By the end of that first season, I had 3 part-time women at my benches, a calendar full through next June, and a monthly income that, for the first time in my life, no one would dare call an allowance. I named the studio In Season, because that was the lesson in the end. Willa knew it. The roses knew it. A flower opens when it is ready, not when somebody under a ring light decides it should. And one more small, true thing. On the studio wall, over my bench, hangs a shadow box with a dried bridal bouquet inside. A gift from the event director of the Larkspur House. Sweet pea, cream roses, and one thin stem of seeded eucalyptus, visible now because Simone had the box remounted with the rose turned open. "Signatures," she said, "belong on the front." "You want to know about Martin?" "I understand. I wanted to know about Martin too, for 18 years. It is a hard habit to put down. The Larkspur contract had been a third of the shop's year. It did not renew. The vineyards followed, and spring came as it does, and with it the valley's wedding season. And Mercer Floral entered it with a creative director who could light a photograph but could not wire an arch, and a back room with nobody in it who knew how to make a rose drink for 10 days. The unraveling was not cinematic. It was arithmetic, the same arithmetic he had lived on, finally run without me in the column. The Monday lobby standing order, the quiet spine of the shop's whole cash flow, went first, and with it the hotel's event calendar. Then came the June weddings booked a year in advance, on the strength of photographs of work that was no longer in the building. Roses opened Thursday for Saturday ceremonies because nobody conditioned them at midnight. A bride's father demanded a partial refund in the middle of the reception, loudly enough that 2 tables heard him do it. Brooke's captions got shorter. The ring lights stayed on, but the benches behind them were empty, and a photograph, it turns out, cannot wire itself to a trellis. The magazine that had photographed Martin and Brooke under my arch ran its vendor list for the new season, and Mercer Floral was not on it, and In Season was. The wedding, theirs, I mean, was postponed. Twice. The last I heard, the ring Brooke posted in April lives in a drawer, because a proposal is cheap, and a business partner with empty benches is expensive, and Brooke, whatever else she is, can read a balance sheet through a ring light just fine. And then, on a Tuesday this June, more than a year after the terrace, the bell over my studio door rang, and it was Martin. He stood among my buckets in his good blazer, older around the eyes. He looked at the full benches, the order board, the 2 brides' names chalked up for the weekend. Then he attempted the old warm voice, the Cabernet voice. He said he was glad for me, really. He said maybe there was a version of this where we all worked together again, the old team. And he said with a smile that he could always spot talent. I let the silence sit, the way Willa taught me grief arrangements need air. Then I said, "I'm sorry. We're not taking new accounts from delivery businesses." And I went back to stripping thorns, at my own bench under my own name, and after a while I heard the bell ring behind him. Here is the part I never said out loud, not even to Sadie. He walked out of that studio, never knowing that the bouquet he knelt with, the one that started his ending, was built by the wife he was replacing, signed in a language he never bothered to learn. I could have told him. One sentence. But explaining yourself to a man like Martin is just handing him the credit again, and I am done billing my worth to his account. Let him wonder why the valley chose me. The people who matter already know. I do not hate him anymore. That is not mercy, just economics. Hate is expensive, and my hands are busy. People in town ask me sometimes, carefully, over the tops of wine glasses, whether I planned it. Whether making that proposal perfect was the coldest revenge this valley has ever seen. And I understand why the story is better that way. But no. I made it perfect because I do not know how to make things badly. That is the one thing he never understood about the woman in the back room. The work was never for him. It was the one place in my life where what I did could not be taken, renamed, or captioned. He got the shop, the sign, and the story. The hands were never his to keep. These days, I get up at 4 a.m. by choice, drive to a glass house full of roses with my name on the door, and condition stems in warm water while the sun comes up over the vines. Some mornings, Sadie brings coffee, and we say nothing at all, and the quiet in that greenhouse is the richest thing I own. A flower will not lie about its season. You can force it to open early, under lamps, in somebody else's winter. But it never holds. For 18 years, a man kept me in his winter and called it my place. But I was never late, and I was never leftover. I was in season. And this spring, at last, I opened. If my story touched you, leave a comment and tell me what you felt. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. I'll see you in the next one.